And this is Humberto interview.
Right, cool.
Slate.
There you go. Alright, Jason, it's been a while I've been promising this, but here we go. I'm going to discuss as much as I can, because I'm working on a few things that I'm limited to talk about, but I will be talking about, you know, as much as I can of this thing. So, and I see that you're from Zenfest. I have a good Zen story. Alright, so let's start off with...
You want me to take this out?
Why,
Still
you
in the
can
shot.
see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Better to look this way or this way?
You can look to me if you want. Right here.
You want like documentary style,
Yeah.
so it's better on this side?
Yeah.
My name's Humberto Guida. I am a journalist and a writer living in Los Angeles, California, but back in the day I grew up in Miami and I was a Florida raver. I started experiencing the rave scene probably in the middle to the late heyday of the Florida rave scene. I started off really young. My first rave was The Edge, if you want to call that a rave, even though it was a club that threw a rave-like party, but technically it was a rave, and I was 15 years old. I was super young. I didn't even know what a rave was. I was sleeping in a friend's house. His parents were gone. Middle of the night, he wakes me up. He's like, somebody's going to come pick us up. A friend of ours has a car. We're going to go to this place called The Edge in Fort Lauderdale. I had heard about The Edge, but that's because I was like into rock and roll. I was like into industrial music. I had seen Marilyn Manson there. Zeta 94.9, the radio station that was into rock, would at the time that existed in South Florida, would often talk about metal shows that were taking place at The Edge. So that's what I thought. I thought we were going to like an industrial like metal party, like at 3 o'clock in the morning. All right, I was 15 years old, up for the adventure. We packed the car in with kids. We get lost on the way at like 4:30. We roll up, and the parking lot, like there's all these, you know, like crazy looking people. I had been to one Lollapalooza at that point. Remember, I'm 15 years old. I'm a freshman in high school. Kind of seemed like that crowd, but different, you know, a little bit. They pop off a little bit more. I saw the biggest jeans, the baggiest jeans that I'd ever seen, which later I would have many pairs of, Jenkos. The girls were out of this world, crazy hairdos and all this stuff. So, okay, this is rave. Now, it was 16 and over to get in at the time, because at 2 o'clock they would stop selling alcohol and they would let kids in. I was 15, mind you. I don't know if the first time I got in for like a student ID. I know that the second or third time I actually climbed the fence and some guy like pulled me up and on the side of the wall. And when I walked into The Edge for the first time, it was the most alien experience I've ever had. It was honestly like walking in the moon. It was very dark, but there was all these beams of light coming at you all over the place. I remember the song that was playing when I went to The Edge for the first time. When I walked in, it was Lollipop Man. Is it Lollipop Man, Union Jack? You know, and it's you know, I hate when people do that, but I'm doing it with trying to mimic the song. And then the siren went off, and then some of the lights come off, and you realize where you are, and there's this crazy club that looked like it was out of like a Nine Inch Nails video, and with a sunken pit where everyone was dancing. You know, one rail around it, and then a second rail on the top. You get lost in the dark corners. It was insane. It really, I mean, talk about life-changing. It blew my mind, and it was so different than anything I'd ever seen. Like, I knew I couldn't explain this to my parents or anyone who had never been to a rave. This is late 94. We're talking about October, November 1994. The Edge had been doing their rave party, I believe, for about a year or two. I'm not sure. And, you know, I remember, you know, if my parents knew where I was right now, I'd be in really big trouble. And, man, I saw people in costumes. It was so different. And, you know, I quickly learned about rave culture, quickly got into it. I was young though, so I couldn't do it that often during that, what I think was really the peak time was 94, 95. It was kind of like a monthly thing at the time. I was 15, 16 years old. And I discovered, you know, things like Plur. Plur is peace, love, unity, respect. And back in the day at this time, there was definitely Plur in the scene. You know what, I mean, I look at little kids now. I'm talking about little kids 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, and, you know, they seem like little kids to me, you know, and that I was that age at that time, and I'd go to these parties, and people were very, very caring. Now, later on, it got a little hectic and a little dark, and sure, you could get taken advantage of, but like in the beginning, man, I'd be there, didn't really do drugs the first few times, except maybe smoke a joint, you know. People would come up, you know, older people would come up and check on us, and they'd be very caring. They'd give us a hand. Like I said, the second or third time I get to the edge, I climb up the wall, and some guy's like, hey, he reaches out his hand and pulls me over the barrier. Saw some amazing shows. You know, I got introduced to DJs like Bruce Wilcox, rest in peace, Mike Sharp, Strike, who was like a Miami guy. The music that I really got into Rabbit in the Moon. I started getting into a lot of breaks, especially being from the Miami set. I would later soon, the next year, 16 years old I believe I was, April 96 maybe, I go to Fever for the first time. And Fever was the first regular, consistent, weekly Miami rave on South Beach. Like the first after hours too. I mean, these parties would go on till, Fever would go on till like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. The Edge would go on till like noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It got to a point too, it was a really easy time to go to raves as a young person because I could wake up 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. This is before cell phones or before everybody had a cell phone, and I'd have a friend pick me up 5 o'clock in the morning on the corner of my street. I'd tell my parents I was going surfing, you know. Didn't have a surfboard, never came back with a tan. And we'd go to the Edge, and we'd get there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and, you know, we'd drop a hit of acid, and we would rave till noon, 1 o'clock in the morning, in the afternoon. It was insane. Fever was where I really got introduced to that Miami mean style of breakbeats and electro funk and it's a sweet harmony, it's a sweet harmony, ooh yeah da 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 da. Fever definitely also inserted two things that in the beginning it inserted a lot of sex appeal. There was a lot of babes. This is South Beach, so there was a lot of babes. Delight used to hang out there. Lady Miss Curie used to hang out there that first year. Big acts. They started bringing in big acts like Juan Atkins, Frankie Bones. You know, songs that were hits like Planet Soul got launched there by people like George Acosta, and that they really introduced that first this sexy, you know, just funky way of raving. It was whereas the Edge was a little bit more nitty gritty and spacey and alien, and later on Fever would also kind of integrate a more b-boy style, right, of raving, because what happened is the rave scene in Florida really started in Central Florida, right? I give props to the Orlando people, props to West Palm Beach, props to Firestone, the Edge in Orlando, because there was an Edge in Orlando, and the Edge in Fort Lauderdale. They started that funky break scene, and the funky breaks that were coming out of Central Florida had a little bit more snare to it. When it got down to Miami, it kind of the Miami bass scene, which had been around from the 80s, which was much more b-boy and breaking and all that stuff, kind of collided with that Central Florida funky break scene and created more of that electro breaks, smooth, sexy, a little hardcore. Would go on to grow and develop a kind of a mean attitude towards the late 90s, and bring a little bit more street into it. And Fever would kind of launch that style, at least in Miami, and kind of then took it back up the state, bringing with it that Miami attitude. And it was, I mean, this was life-changing for me. It completely, I rediscovered music because I was into rock and hip-hop, and I didn't understand music in its most abstract form, you know, and that's what electronic music was becoming. It was the new classical music of back in the day. It was just understanding the structure and the subjective experience of these very actually mechanical, technical, precise beats. It's music that's like subjective and objective at the same time. I started having experience with the drugs. My first roll, okay, because when I was a kid I started going to raves, I didn't have much money. $5 for a hit of acid and I'd be, you know, on it all night. And just for people that say rave was all about the drugs, it's not all about the drugs. It was about the culture, it was about the music, but we need to be realistic about the influence and the fact that opening up our minds to these psychedelic experiences.
Yeah, I just felt it.
Well, it just went dimmed on that part.
Yeah.
Is that?
Let's cut.